Let me tell you something that might go against the grain of what the world teaches you. You don't need to announce your every move to be powerful. In fact, the more powerfully you're moving, the less noise you'll need to make. See, too many people are in love with talking about what they're going to do. They're addicted to the applause of starting something, not the reward of finishing it. But purpose-driven people, they understand that real transformation happens in silence. When the seed is in the soil, it doesn't shout. It breaks open in the dark, quietly, and then one day it bursts through the surface and everyone says, "Where did that come from?" But you know, it came from your hidden grind, from your obedience in the silence. Now, listen closely. The moment you speak prematurely about what God is still developing in you, you invite distraction, doubt, and in some cases, destruction. Not because you're not called, but because you exposed it too early. The enemy doesn't need to know your plan. The critics don't need an update. You don't owe anyone access to your process. Your faithfulness in private will speak volumes in public when the time is right. Let me take it a step further. When you work silently, you are no longer relying on external validation. You're not chasing applause, you're building capacity. You're not trying to impress, you're being impressed upon by discipline, commitment, and divine instruction. That kind of inner work produces long-term fruit, not fast likes. Let's talk strategy. If you're building a business, don't tell people what you're going to do. Build it. Don't post every step. Execute. When the result shows up, that's your marketing. When the results hit the marketplace, that's your announcement. And if you did the work right, people will say, "How did you do it so fast?" What they don't see is the nights you stayed up, the books you studied, the prayer you committed to, the sacrifices you made in silence. Silence is a multiplier. When you work in quiet, you eliminate the noise that distracts others. You enter into a zone of clarity, and in that clarity, decisions get made faster, distractions fade, and confidence rises. Not from people clapping, but from progress stacking. Let me give you this final principle. Anything that is truly blessed doesn't need to beg for attention. Oil doesn't scream, but it anoints. Gold doesn't talk, but it's valuable. The most powerful elements in the earth are silent, and they work. Silence breeds focus. In a world filled with noise, distraction, and constant external stimulation, the ability to operate in silence is a superpower. Most people are consumed with showing their progress instead of actually making progress. They become addicted to the perception of movement rather than the discipline of true advancement. But when you choose to work in silence, you create a space where your energy is concentrated, undivided, and fully present in the task at hand. Focus isn't something that just happens, it's something that must be protected. Silence acts like a shield, keeping distractions out and intention in. When you're silent, you're not explaining yourself to people who don't understand your vision. You're not wasting emotional bandwidth defending your path. You're not leaking creative energy trying to prove you're on the right track. Instead, you're building, you're thinking, you're analyzing, you're adjusting. The mind works best in clarity, and clarity comes through solitude. Great thinkers, innovators, and leaders have all understood the value of strategic silence. They knew that breakthroughs don't come in the noise of the crowd, but in the stillness of intention. Working in silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the most without feeling the need to broadcast it. It's an intentional form of discipline. It's a decision to focus on the mission rather than the reaction. It allows you to train your mind to become fully aligned with your goals. Most people fail not because they don't have potential, but because their energy is too scattered. They're reacting to opinions, chasing trends, comparing their pace with others. But the person who learns to block out the noise and lock into their own lane becomes unstoppable. Because focus is a multiplier, what you focus on expands, what you give energy to grows. Silence gives you that room to multiply your effectiveness without draining your resources on shallow pursuits. Another dimension of silent focus is the spiritual clarity it cultivates. In silence, you begin to hear more than your thoughts. You begin to discern direction. When your world is quiet, divine instructions become louder. You begin to understand what's for you and what's simply noise. You start to sense when something is a distraction dressed as opportunity. Silence puts you in tune with your assignment because it eliminates the competition of voices all trying to speak into your destiny. Too often, we let others interpret our path for us, but real clarity is personal. It's born out of your own internal conversations with God, your values, your pain, your dreams. And that kind of clarity can't be crowdsourced. It has to be cultivated, protected, and nurtured in the quiet spaces where focus lives. Focus built in silence also increases your confidence. You're no longer dependent on external affirmation to keep going. You've built a rhythm between your actions and your vision. You've learned to trust yourself. You've seen what happens when you lock in. Confidence doesn't just come from speaking affirmations. It comes from honoring your commitments in the dark, when no one's watching. It comes from choosing to finish what you started without needing a round of applause every time you take a step. The more you do this, the more you trust that your process is working, even if it's not public yet. Working silently trains your brain to focus on process over praise. You stop needing motivation because you've built momentum. Momentum is born in quiet, sustained effort, the kind of effort that isn't glamorous, but that moves mountains over time. Focus becomes your lifestyle, not just your temporary state. And in that lifestyle, success stops being a moment, it becomes a pattern. Real work is done in private. What most people celebrate in public is the result of hours, months, and sometimes years of effort that no one ever saw. The most meaningful transformations happen behind the scenes, not under the spotlight. The world is obsessed with visibility, with broadcasting progress, with gaining attention. But real growth, real mastery, real elevation comes from the invisible disciplines, those actions repeated in private that shape the public outcome. When no one is watching, that's when character is built. That's when resilience is developed. That's when grit is formed. The gym is empty when the work is the hardest. The pages of a journal don't get likes. The early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices, the rejections, the moments of doubt, those are the ingredients of success, not the applause, not the headlines, not the stage. What happens in private reveals how serious a person really is. Public statements are easy to make, but private actions are the truth. You can tell everyone you're working on a goal, but the evidence is in the quiet hours you give to it when there's no recognition coming your way. Discipline is proven not by what you post, but by what you persist in doing when there's no praise. When you truly commit to something, you stop needing a crowd. You become fueled by your own mission. You show up to do the work even when it feels invisible because you know it's not about the moment. It's about the outcome. And that outcome is only born when the process is honored without shortcuts, without detours, and without delay. Private work also eliminates the pressure to perform. When everything is on display, people often get caught up in maintaining an image rather than refining their craft. But when you step back and give yourself space to work privately, you remove the need to impress and give yourself permission to improve. Growth requires mistakes. Growth requires failure. Growth requires repetition. And those things are best handled in a protected environment where you can focus on getting better, not on looking perfect. Public eyes add pressure. Private work adds strength. That strength is internal, and it becomes the foundation for anything worth building. A skyscraper doesn't begin with what's seen above ground. It begins with what's dug below the surface. Deep work is quiet work, and the deeper the foundation, the taller the structure can rise. Privacy also gives you control over your narrative. When people see only the result, they don't get to label your process. They can't define what your struggle looked like. They can't attach assumptions to your effort. They're left to witness the fruit without being part of the pruning. That's the power of doing real work privately. You avoid the noise and keep your energy where it belongs. You're not pulled into explanation mode. You don't owe anyone updates. Your focus is on building, and the building is what will speak for you when it's finished. Private work keeps the process sacred. It becomes your sanctuary, a place where you can refine, evaluate, adjust, and elevate without outside interference. In the quiet, you get to know your own voice. You get to listen to your intuition, to divine direction, to the wisdom that comes when you're not distracted by performance. Silence teaches you how to navigate your weaknesses with grace and your strengths with humility. It strips away the illusions and forces you to confront the reality of your effort. That confrontation is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. You can lie to others, but you can't lie to yourself when you're alone with the work. You either did it or you didn't. You either stayed consistent or you let convenience win. That kind of honesty builds maturity. It builds integrity. It builds the inner infrastructure required to carry success without being crushed by it. Real work requires solitude. It demands intention. It thrives in the absence of noise. It grows in the hidden place where no one claps and no one criticizes. Only you and the mission and the mirror. Results speak louder than announcements. In a culture where people are quick to declare their dreams, post their plans, and publicize their goals, it's easy to mistake talk for traction. But talk is cheap when it's not backed by proof. What really moves people, what really turns heads, what really inspires belief, is not what you say you'll do, but what you've actually done. It's the evidence of results that commands respect. Results are undeniable. They don't require long explanations or justifications. They don't depend on charisma or storytelling. They speak for themselves with authority that can't be faked. When someone shows you the fruit of their labor, you don't need them to explain the seed they planted. The outcome tells you everything you need to know about the process they honored. Results are the scoreboard of consistency. They are the echo of private effort and quiet sacrifice. They reveal whether or not a person followed through on the commitments they made in silence. A person who produces results doesn't need to convince anyone of their worth or their ability. Their track record does the talking. That's why the most successful people in any field usually speak the least about what they're going to do. They're too busy doing it. They know that when it's done, it won't need promotion. It will carry its own weight. Results also silence critics. People may doubt your ideas. They may question your methods. They may mock your path, but once you deliver results, the conversation changes. Results eliminate opinions because they stand on facts. The entrepreneur who builds a thriving business after years of rejection no longer needs to explain why they believe. The student who goes from failing to graduating with honors no longer has to justify their dream. The athlete who trains in obscurity and wins on the big stage doesn't need to explain the grind. The victory tells the story. And that story is more powerful than any promise ever made in advance. There's also a deeper principle at play. When you're focused on producing results, you stop wasting time trying to get people to believe in your potential. You stop needing validation and start proving value. You shift from presentation mode to production mode. That's when you gain leverage, because the marketplace doesn't pay for intention. It pays for execution. People don't invest in what you hope to build. They invest in what you've already built. They don't follow promises. They follow performance. Results are your proof of work. They are the receipt for your discipline, your decisions, and your delayed gratification. Focusing on results also forces clarity. It forces you to define what success looks like and to measure whether or not you're actually moving toward it. It pushes you to ask better questions, refine your approach, and eliminate what isn't working. Because when you're chasing results, you can't afford to be sentimental about methods that aren't producing. You become obsessed not with staying busy, but with being effective. You stop being impressed with motion and start being focused on progress. That mindset is rare, but it's what separates the talkers from the builders, the dreamers from the doers, the planners from the producers, and the best part about results is that they compound. When you produce one result, it gives you the confidence and capacity to produce another. Success builds on itself. Each milestone creates momentum, and as that momentum grows, people start to notice. Not because you shouted the loudest, but because your fruit made them listen. They saw what you built. They witnessed what you accomplished. They experienced the impact of your consistency, and that impact resonates far louder than any speech, post, or prediction. The results became your voice, and that voice carries weight no announcement ever could. People can't sabotage what they don't see. One of the most overlooked forms of protection is privacy. When you keep your moves, goals, and growth to yourself, you reduce the risk of interference, misinterpretation, and unwanted influence. Not everyone is rooting for your success, even if they smile in your face. There are people who carry silent envy, disguised advice, and subtle discouragement that can derail a dream if you're not careful. When you share too much, too soon, you expose your vision to the energy and intentions of others who may not have the capacity to understand or the purity to support. Silence becomes a safeguard, not because you're hiding out of fear, but because you're building with wisdom. Sabotage doesn't always come in the form of open opposition. Sometimes it's wrapped in fake concern or coated in comparison. A person might question your ability not because they truly doubt you, but because they fear you'll succeed. They may suggest you slow down, change course, or wait for a better time, not to help you, but to keep you small. When you work quietly, you shield your vision from the noise of unnecessary opinions and protect the sacredness of what you're building. Your progress becomes harder to predict, and when people can't predict your moves, they can't preempt them. That's a strategic advantage in both personal and professional life. Your energy is finite, and when you're constantly explaining, defending, or justifying your goals to others, you leak that energy in the wrong direction. Instead of pouring it into execution, you start pouring it into explanation. That's a trap. The moment you start performing for people's approval, you've already lost your focus. But when you move in silence, you stay locked in. You keep the main thing the main thing. Your creativity flows uninterrupted. Your discipline strengthens. Your confidence deepens because it's no longer based on someone else's applause, but on your own integrity. The fewer eyes on your process, the more freedom you have to make mistakes, refine your vision, and grow without pressure. There's also a spiritual truth embedded in this principle. When something is in its infancy, it's vulnerable. Exposing it too early invites attack. Just like a seed buried in the soil needs time to take root before it breaks the surface, your ideas need time to mature before they face the world. The unseen season is a season of grace. It allows you to grow in strength, sharpen your skill, and deepen your faith without the weight of public scrutiny. Moving in silence honors the divine process of becoming before revealing. It acknowledges that not everything is ready to be seen just because it exists. Timing is as important as talent, and discernment is just as valuable as discipline. When people can't see what you're building, they can't attach labels to it. They can't rush your process, diminish your effort, or try to replicate your blueprint. What's hidden can't be copied. What's protected can't be polluted. What's guarded has room to grow with purity. Too many dreams have been destroyed not because they lacked potential, but because they lacked protection. Overexposure is dangerous. Sharing your vision with the wrong people is like planting seeds in poisoned soil. No matter how good the seed is, it won't grow in a toxic environment. But when you keep it close, when you protect it, when you water it in private, it develops roots strong enough to sustain the weight of public fruit. Strategic silence is not about fear, it's about focus. It's not about secrecy, it's about stewardship. You're not hiding from the world, you're preparing for it. And preparation done in silence is often what gives birth to performance that cannot be denied. You're not avoiding the spotlight forever. You're making sure that when you do step into it, you're ready, whole, and unshakable. Because by then, the foundation has already been laid in private, away from the opinions, agendas, and intentions of those who didn't need to see it. Silence builds spiritual discipline. In the stillness, you confront yourself. You face your fears without distraction. You sit with your doubts without the noise of outside reassurance. That's where true discipline begins, not in front of an audience, but in the sacred solitude of your own process. Silence requires self-control, and self-control is one of the highest forms of strength. When you resist the urge to announce, defend, or prove, you demonstrate that your motives are anchored in purpose, not praise. Discipline in silence teaches you to work for the outcome, not the applause. It strengthens your ability to stay committed when there's no feedback, no recognition, no affirmation. And that level of consistency becomes the foundation for true spiritual maturity. When you choose silence, you strip away the layers of external validation that often mask internal weakness. You begin to operate from conviction rather than crowd influence. You stop asking for permission to grow. You stop depending on applause to move forward. Instead, you begin to cultivate a relationship with obedience. You learn to do what's necessary, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely, even when it doesn't seem to be working yet. That's the heart of discipline, sticking with what's right even when it's not immediately rewarding. And in that silent commitment, something powerful begins to develop. You stop being reactionary and start being intentional. Spiritual discipline also means trusting divine timing. Silence teaches you to move when it's time to move, not when your emotions say so or when others pressure you. In the quiet, you start listening with spiritual ears. You begin to discern between impulse and instruction. You no longer mistake movement for progress. Instead, you wait, you pray, you reflect, and then you act, not out of fear or insecurity, but out of clarity. That clarity produces alignment, and alignment is where power flows. Many people rush because they fear falling behind, but discipline teaches you that nothing done outside of your divine timing can truly prosper. Silence becomes the incubator for patience, and patience becomes the soil where peace is planted. The absence of noise also trains your spiritual senses. When you're not distracted by the constant need to be seen or heard, you start becoming more sensitive to what's happening inside of you. You begin to recognize the subtle shifts, the inner nudges, the quiet corrections that shape your character. That's where transformation happens, not in the noise, but in the nuance. You learn to hear the whisper of wisdom rather than waiting for the shout of consequence. And once you begin to trust that inner guidance, your steps become more purposeful. You no longer chase every opportunity. You no longer react to every opinion. You become anchored, and that anchoring is the result of silent training. Silence is also where humility grows. When you're not broadcasting your every move, you're reminded that the journey isn't about impressing people. It's about becoming who you were created to be. You stop measuring your worth by visibility. You stop equating silence with insignificance. You start realizing that some of the greatest victories are won in moments nobody sees. That understanding frees you from the need to compete. It releases you from the pressure to compare. It keeps your eyes on your own assignment and your spirit grounded in gratitude. Spiritual discipline is about mastering the invisible battles that prepare you for visible impact. And those battles are only fought and won in silence. When you live in silence long enough, you develop a different kind of strength. It's the strength of knowing you can do hard things without recognition. It's the strength of holding onto a promise without demanding proof. It's the strength of staying committed even when the reward seems far away. That strength becomes part of your identity. It shapes the way you lead, the way you serve, the way you build. Because once you've been trained in silence, you no longer need the stage to validate your calling. You know the work is real because you've done it in the dark, when no one was clapping, when no one was watching, when the only voice you could rely on was the one inside of you and the one above you. Quiet action builds confidence. When you move without announcing, without performing, without seeking validation, you begin to trust yourself on a deeper level. You start to recognize your own consistency, your own strength, your own rhythm. Confidence doesn't come from other people telling you you're good enough. It comes from you proving to yourself, again and again, that you are capable of showing up, doing the work, and honoring your word even when no one else is watching. That kind of quiet, private momentum is more powerful than any applause because it's not built on external energy. It's built from within. It's built from repetition, from reliability, from the quiet victories that stack up over time and remind you that you are becoming who you were meant to be when you take action in silence. You create space for growth without the pressure of performance. You don't have to meet anyone's expectations except your own. You're not chasing approval or avoiding criticism. You're simply doing the work. That simplicity creates confidence because there's no noise to distract you from the mission. You begin to focus on progress, not perception, and every small step forward becomes proof that you are moving in the right direction. That proof compounds, it turns into belief, and belief is the root of unshakable confidence. It's not loud, it doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you show up under pressure. Most people overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can build in a year. Quiet action allows you to focus on the long game. You're not rushing to produce quick results just to impress others. You're building something sustainable. You're investing in your foundation, and when your foundation is strong, your confidence becomes secure. It's not fragile because it's not borrowed. It's not based on someone else's opinion. It's grounded in your own effort, your own time, your own sacrifice. That's what makes it resilient. Confidence built in silence doesn't crumble when you're misunderstood or overlooked because it was never dependent on being seen in the first place. Taking action without needing to be noticed also builds integrity. It aligns what you say with what you do. And when your actions align with your values consistently, you begin to respect yourself on a higher level. That self-respect turns into courage. You're no longer afraid to face challenges because you've already faced yourself. You've already seen what you're capable of. You've already learned how to endure, how to push, how to get back up without needing anyone to pull you. That level of self-knowledge is what real confidence is made of. It's not about being the loudest or the most impressive. It's about being the most faithful to your purpose. Quiet action is also a sign of maturity. Immature confidence looks for instant validation. It needs to be seen, liked, shared. But mature confidence doesn't need to prove anything. It just performs. It does the job, delivers the result, finishes the race. And when it's done, it doesn't demand applause. It simply evaluates, adjusts, and starts again. That cycle of quiet, consistent improvement creates a rhythm of success that becomes unstoppable. You stop questioning whether or not you're enough because you've already demonstrated it to yourself. Through action, the most powerful people in the world often speak the least about what they're doing. Not because they're hiding, but because they're focused. They understand that every time you talk about what you're going to do instead of actually doing it, you're stealing momentum from yourself. You're giving away energy that could be used for execution. Quiet action protects that energy. It preserves your drive. It keeps your attention on what matters. And the more you protect your focus, the more your confidence grows. Because focus leads to results, and results reinforce belief. Confidence built in silence is unshakable because it's not reactive. It doesn't change with trends, moods, or opinions. It's rooted in reality. It's born from discipline. It's proven through private battles, late nights, early mornings, difficult choices, and unseen victories. And when you've won enough of those unseen battles, you stop needing to explain yourself to the world because your presence begins to carry the quiet authority of someone who's done the work, paid the price, and earned the right to lead without saying a word. The power of silent work is not just a strategy, it's a mindset, a spiritual discipline, and a lifestyle of purpose-driven execution. When you move quietly, you're not hiding. You're building with wisdom, clarity, and protection. You're cultivating focus in a distracted world, developing strength in solitude, and allowing your results to speak on your behalf. You're safeguarding your vision from interference, deepening your confidence through consistency, and aligning your process with divine timing rather than public pressure. In the silence, your faith matures, your character is refined, and your confidence becomes unshakable. The world may not notice your effort today, but when the fruit appears, it will be undeniable, because what is built in silence is often revealed in power, and what is born in private carries a strength that cannot be shaken by noise.